In this video, we'll be replacing the rear strut canister on this 2005 Honda Element. We're going to remove the rear wheel. It's going to be a 19 millimeter. Go ahead and take off the lug nuts now. So now we're inside the rear of the vehicle, and you'll notice on both sides you're going to have these little covers. These are going to be access covers to your rear shocks, or in this case your rear struts. There's little tabs at the bottom, or little openings at the bottom here. We're going to use a pick tool to get in there and just pull that cover open. It's going to be held in by these little clips here. We can set this aside. So now down inside here, you're going to have two mounting bolts holding in your strut on the top side. They're going to be 14 millimeters. So we're going to use an impact on a swivel to get down in there. There's one. There's two. So now underneath the vehicle, we have our strut, which we're going to try and remove, but to do that, we're going to take it out this way. We need to remove our Evap fuel canister. So we're going to start by removing the canister. We're going to remove the canister cover here, which is a couple of clips. There's two in front, two in back. There's a lot of dirt and grime behind it, so we'll clean that out, which will allow us to push these center tabs in and pull this down. There we go. So there's going to be two more on the back side. So now around the back side of the canister, two more clips, and this one looks like it's all the way out. We just need to work on this one here. Pull straight down. Now, there was and there should be one more push clip in this position here, all the way up here, facing the front of the vehicle. So on our Evap canister here, we're going to need to remove all of these hoses and all of these plugs. We're going to start with this large hose here. I'm just going to use a pair of panel tools to see if I can wiggle that hose back at all. Nope, all right, there we go. All right. Now the hoses and things that have a little length to them, we're going to tuck them up and over the rear end just to get them out of our way. Next, we're going to go for this quick disconnect line here. Now, these panel tools are great for these quick disconnects. You can reach both sides at once. There we are. And our lock is still there, which is good. We can now move this out of the way. We'll move on to our connections here, our electrical connections. Push down on the tab on the top and pull the plug backwards. So with this last plug here, we're going to push in that tab, use our pick tool, and just pry that plug backwards. There we go. Couple more connections. We have a hose straight up here. All right, just push our hose up and off and set it aside. Now straight up here, we're going to find a 10 millimeter bolt. It's going to be right next to another one. And this one right here is going to be holding in your canister. So we'll go ahead and back out that bolt. So now on the outside of this fuel canister box, we have a bracket. if you can find your strut or your spring, it's going to be behind there. It's going to be a 10 millimeter bolt on the rear and then another 10 millimeter bolt forward on the side. So we'll take both of those out now. So our bolt here broke. We'll have to do something about that when we reinstall. So on this bolt here, we went ahead and added some heat, but because we're in the fuel area, we used an option that doesn't put out an open flame. And there's our canister and our bolt. What we can do here is just lower our canister without fully taking it out, because we still have a harness attached to the back here. That's actually what's still holding it in place. So we don't need to remove the canister. We just need to gain a little bit more room to remove our shock or our strut. So with this loose, that's good enough for now. As long as it's not going to fall, we can go ahead and move on to the bottom bolt of our strut. Now down to the bottom of our strut, we have one bolt holding it in place. Remember, we've loosened up the two or removed the top two bolts. So this is going to be it. Once we remove this, we'll be able to remove our strut straight out the back. The nut in the back is going to be a 22 millimeter as well as the bolt. So we have a 22 millimeter wrench, 22 millimeter socket on an impact. We can remove that bolt. So now we have our bolt almost all the way through here. We're just going to have to get this bolt all the way out, and then we can remove our strut. Sometimes you can continue to back this bolt out and it will thread itself out. What we can also do, pair of angled needle nose, just keep tapping it out. We can tell that our strut is putting a lot of downward pressure because the bolt is now angled downward. So we'll just try and rearrange that strut a little bit so we can get that bolt out. We're going to use a pry bar and just wiggle the bottom of that strut as we back out the bolt. There's your bolt. So now we have the bottom bolt of our strut free, which means our strut is actually loose. What we're going to do is come in from the bottom here and just try and pry the bottom of this out. Now just be prepared for it to drop out. We can just grab it, give her a little wiggle, and pull it right out. And this is why you needed to move your fuel vapor canister. And there's your strut. Now that we've set up our rear strut in our compressor tool, I'm going to go ahead and compress that spring and remove the cartridge from the spring so we can install the spring on our new cartridge. Now that we have our strut compressed, meaning the spring is compressed and the center cartridge is free, now we can go ahead and work at the top nut here and remove our cartridge. So typically with this setup, what you want to do is loosen up this nut while holding this center pin from spinning. First thing we're going to try is just to hit this nut with an impact gun and see if that releases it. If not, then we'll have to work with a wrench and something here to hold the center. Because we're replacing the cartridge, it will be okay to come in here on the actual metal piston itself and grab it with a set of locking pliers or a set of pliers if we need to. We're going to be using a 17mm socket and an impact. See if we can get that nut to spin free. No. So now what we're going to do is, instead of putting the locking pliers in the center, which you can see is a little tough, we can't see that metal rod coming through, I'm going to put a pair of locking pliers on the top. So turn it to me to work. Okay. And then we're going to use a 17mm wrench. There we go, and we can lower the cartridge out the middle. So you can see our old and our new. We have a couple of pieces we have to swap over onto our new cartridge. So we'll take these two off here as a set. We keep them in the same orientation, and we'll slide our bumper up and off, and then we can discard our old cartridge. And we're going to take our bumper and slide it on all the way down. Then we're going to take our two big washers here. We're going to slide them right down. They're going to rest against this ridge here. We'll just let them drop down. Now we can take our new assembly, put it into our spring and our top plate. So now installing our new cartridge into the spring and top plate, you're going to want to keep this bottom spring aligned in this bottom plate here. It will move as you're doing this, but ideally you want this to sit in here when you get close to being tightened up. Our whole top mounting plate here hasn't come off. If anything, the washer on top might pop off. Just make sure you sit that down in the right direction. And we're going to feed our new cartridge up the middle and through the top hole. Now we have the top of our new cartridge poking out the top with a couple of threads. We'll go ahead and put our nut on the top. What that'll allow us to do is let go of the whole assembly. Now from here, we can work on the top with just a hand down the bottom, guiding the bottom plate to that spring. So what we like to do here is grab a pair of locking pliers or a small wrench if you have it for the very top. What this tool will do is allow the actual cartridge to not spin while we tighten down this nut on top. Now this nut that comes with your new cartridge is a 14mm. So we'll just start tightening this down. And we're going to keep an eye on the bottom. As we get tighter, we're pulling the bottom upwards to the spring. All right, now once we get that nut as tight as it will go, we can then align that bottom cup with the spring, and we can start to release our compressor. As you release your compressor, you just want to take a look and make sure that that spring's going into the area it needs to and everything's still lined up. Once you've released all the tension on your spring, just go ahead and give it a double check. You want to make sure you're in that spot for the bottom spring. You want to make sure nothing is misaligned. The top is sitting nice and level. Now we can go ahead and remove our strut from the compressor and put it in the vehicle. So now with our strut, we're going to feed it up into the top of the vehicle. We're going to try and align our 2 bolts. Okay, once we have those, then we're going to concentrate on the bottom here. We're going to try and get it into position and just put a pry bar in there to hold it. So while holding the strut up, we're going to use a rubber mallet and hit our lower mount into this position here. Now because that was so tough to get into place, it's pretty much holding itself, but you want to be careful not to let go. Once we get them aligned enough that we can put something through just to hold that position for us. And we're going to go inside the vehicle and loosely tighten down our top 2 nuts. So now inside the vehicle we can take our 2 nuts and we're just going to thread them on by hand to start, and then we'll just snug them up. We'll be retightening and torquing all these under load. And these new nuts that come with your strut are going to be 15 millimeter. And they are locking nuts. All right, now we'll go underneath and work on the bottom mount. So now if you're working by yourself and you're having trouble getting your hole to line up on the bottom of your strut, what you can do is come over here to your link. We're going to undo the top bolt and remove our top link. It'll give you more play in the rear suspension. Our link is going to be a 15 millimeter, and we're going to try and spin it loose while keeping an eye on the inside flange. If the inside flange spins, then we'll need to put a wrench inside there to hold it. Yep, now the inside's spinning, so we'll go ahead and put a wrench back here. So the inside flange is going to be an 18 millimeter. I'm going to wrench on that. We'll go ahead and loosen the nut here. Now there's a nut and a washer. We'll take them both off. And while we're here, we're going to push our link through the rear sway bar. Now this hopefully gives us enough room to pull our rear suspension down slightly. And now we'll come back again with the same pry bar and see if we have a little bit of an easier time lining up those holes. Now to finish this bolt off coming all the way through, we're going to pry up this side because it's now at a down angle. We need to go level. So we're going to pry up this side just a little bit. And give it a tap with our hammer. What you don't want to do is send it all the way through, because now you can't put your nut on that bolt. So in our case, it went all the way through. We're just going to pry it up a little bit to level out that hole and send that bolt back just enough to put the nut on. And once that nut's on, we can go ahead and tighten it down and it'll come together. We can take our 22mm wrench and our 22mm socket and snug these up. Before we tighten them down, we're going to want to put our rear suspension here on this side under load, and we'll come back and torque everything down, as well as our link. We'll go ahead and snug this up. Now the goal here isn't to tighten it all the way down. We want to just take the play out and snug it up, and we'll actually tighten it down under load. So I'm just going to back this off a little. So now we're going to put our link back in. And you can see our rear suspension's lowered a little bit to match up with our new strut. So we'll just pull that rear sway bar down to meet it. Put our washer and our nut back on. And our 18mm on the back. Our 15mm on front, we'll just snug these up. Under load, we'll tighten them down to the torque spec. So now what we can do is put a pole jack underneath our rear suspension. We're going to raise this side suspension to mimic load of the vehicle, and then we'll come back and torque everything to spec. So now your bottom strut bolt here is going to be torqued down to 69 foot-pounds. Again, we're going to back it up with a 22 wrench. So now with our rear suspension under load, we'll tighten down our link to 29 foot-pounds. Our in-two top nuts here are going to get torqued down to 54 foot-pounds. Once you're done torquing your two bolts on top here, we can put our cover on. It's going to be pressed into place. So now that you have your top two bolts torqued down under load, we can go ahead and take the pole jack off of our suspension. And if you're working at home on the ground, this would be when you would remove your floor jack. We can remove this, get it out of the way, and move on. So now we can remount our fuel vapor canister. We're going to start over here with the one bolt that broke on us earlier. And we'll move across to the other one here. And our last bolt is going to be straight up here by your hose connections. So right here, we're going to make sure that our lock is in position. It's still locked on that little groove. We're going to take our quick disconnect line. We're going to make sure on the inside of that there's no debris or anything in this area here. Make a good clean connection. We're going to line up these locking tabs with this cutout window. We're going to push straight down to lock it in. Give it a little tug up. Make sure it's locked. And then from there we can move on to our hose. And there is no hose clamp on this. It's just going to be push until it's all the way seated to the back. All right, now between the canister and the tank, there's one more electrical connection. We'll plug that in. So now the last step to our canister here is put our cover on. You're going to have 4 clips to push into on our canister. I'm going to align 2 on this side, the front side. Push to click. We'll come around the other side and line those up. So our rear 2 clips, line them up and push in. So if you follow the inside of your canister, cover all the way up, there's going to be 1 push clip up in the top that's going to hold in place. So when I do a wheel, I like to put on top and bottom lug nut, rock back and forth, continue to tighten them down by hand. This just helps you get it nice and flat against the rotor. Give it a look, looks good. So we're going to snug these up in a crisscross pattern. And then we'll lower it down, put the tire on the ground, and torque them down. So now that we've lowered the vehicle down, our tire's on the ground, we're going to go ahead and torque down our lug nuts to 79 foot-pounds. We're going to do it in a crisscross pattern. After finishing this installation, it's important to have an alignment done on your vehicle.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.